want to introduce you to my great-grandmother, Mary Lou Brown Elmore. Out of all of my great-grandparents, this is the only one that I have memories of as a child and young teenager. Yes, you heard me right. She was 98 years old when she passed away, and I was 16 years old at that time. She was a small woman, and she had really long hair. When she would get up in the morning, she would come into the living room after having made her breakfast, and she would sit and brush that long hair and put it up in a tight bun on her head. She lived so long that a couple of times she was featured in the local newspaper as a human interest story. I have copies of a couple of those stories, but one of them I cannot find. The article that I'm having trouble finding is one about Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys that came to Reform, Alabama to give a concert at the old movie theater. My mother, Mary Bell Skelton Bonner, and I went to see the show, and my mother was a very bold woman. She went backstage after the concert and asked Bill if he would be so kind as to come and visit with Mary Lou, since she could not come to the concert. Bill was hesitant at first, but my mother was quite a formidable woman, and when she asked, people usually acted. So Bill Monroe came over to my great-grandmother's house and visited with her for a little while, and we have autographs of all the band members. She was thrilled by this visit. There has also been speculation about Mary Lou possibly having Native American ancestry. We're not completely sure of that. There's been I found lots of information in my mother's papers when she passed away, that there were lots of emails going around about possible connection to the Cherokee Nation. And if you look at pictures of Mary Lou, she does have high cheekbones. And if you look a couple of generations back from Mary Lou, there's a family of Stricklands where the family was kinsmen. A lot of the boys' names, the males had this beginning of their name was K-I-N, and that seems to be, or there's information to suggest that has something to do with the Cherokee Nation. My mother, Mary Bell, spent a lot of time with Mary Lou, Lois, Mary Bell's mother, my grandmother, Emma, Bee, and Lucille, all of the sisters. Often people would tease her when she was out with them that they looked like sisters, and my mother would say, yes, and can you believe it? I am the oldest. That just shows you about my mother's sense of humor. One thing that struck me by Mary Lou as a teenager is that I asked her one day why she sat by the window all the time in her house. She told me that she had always been fascinated by automobiles because they had been invented in her lifetime. And that one thing that she told me put her life into perspective for me, to live almost a century and the things that she must have seen change. Now, growing up, I had always thought that Thanksgiving and birthday celebrations went together. I didn't know any better. Mary Lou was born on November 25th, and we always celebrated her birthday at Thanksgiving. Since she had 9 children, the birthday parties were quite spectacular with the amount of grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and eventually great-great-grandchildren that would show up. We have made pictures with her showing 5 generations of the family. As far back as I could remember, we would gather at her youngest son's home, Comer Elmore, and celebrate her birthday. In fact, I never was sure exactly what my great-grandmother's birthday was. I just assumed it was Thanksgiving Day. Mary Lou's husband died long before she did, and my mother says that she lived with various children over the years. I know my mother grew up with Mary Lou being a constant presence in her life. My mother was actually named after Mary Lou and named after her other grandmother, my other great-grandmother, R. Bell Skelton. At the time that I knew Mary Lou, she was living with one of her daughters, Emma, who was also a widow. They lived in an apartment in Reform, Alabama. At around the age of 97, Mary Lou fell in the kitchen and broke her hip. Doctors attempted to give her a new hip, but from my recollection, when they attempted to replace it, they found that she had cancer and her body rejected the hip. From that time on, Mary Lou was bedridden, and she did not last a long time after that. She was on some sort of medication, probably for pain, that would cause her to hallucinate. One time, when my mother and I were visiting, Mary Lou was complaining to my mother to get her out of the snow. She could not understand why my mother had her outside in the snow in a little red wagon. When Mary Lou passed away, the funeral was a spectacular event. Sand Springs Methodist Church in Gordo, Alabama is not very big, and at best it could hold most of the family. I remember sitting in that little church, seeing people on the outside looking through every window of the church. One description from one of the presiding ministers, I think it was probably Chester Free, he talked about Mary Lou getting on a big ship with billowing sails to take her home. It was the loveliest image I could see of her going home, and it remains with me today as an image I shall never forget.